Decided to do a tier list of all of the meta decks for Pokemon TCG in the new Pitch Black format. And also I've included some decks that maybe you wouldn't consider meta, but they are seeing enough play, newer archetypes, that I think it's worth considering them as well. But all of the main meta contender decks going into the Pokemon World Championships, I'm going to be covering here and giving my opinion on what tier they are in the current meta. Starting with Festival Lead, because I think my opinion on Festival Lead is maybe somewhat controversial or is not in line with what I've been seeing a lot of other people say. I still, even with the release of the new Gladions Final Battle card, I just am not convinced by the Festival Lead deck. I don't think it's as good as it gets made out to be. It's seeing really significant meta share at the moment. A lot of people are playing it to significant success in online tournaments. However, I am overall not convinced because of its unfavorable matchup into Dragapult, specifically Dragapult Dusknoir. I think if good players are going to be playing that deck, which they for sure will be, Dragapult Dusknoir, then I think they're going to have a very easy time into Festival Lead. A lot of people have ranked it as an A tier deck, but for me, it's comfortably in the B tier. Also, just to acknowledge my bias, I have been playing Zoroark a lot recently, and Festival Lead is a kind of bugbear, difficult matchup for Zoroark. And overall, I'm just not so impressed by the Festival Lead deck, the way that it kind of plays, relying on a Pokemon that can search any one card. Either it gets that set up with its Thwackies. If it's able to do that, then it can run over a lot of decks. However, I still don't think it's consistent enough. I think that my advice to Festival Lead players would be to maximize the consistency cards in your deck, as opposed to over-teching, including a bunch of extra cards for specific matchups. I would say if you can find a way to, on top of your 4 Lily's Determination, if you can run another card that allows you to draw into another draw supporter, then I think that would be worthwhile, because Festival Lead to me still has been bricking quite a bit, and even in what is a fairly unfavorable matchup in Zoroark, I've been able to beat it quite a few times just by getting them to brick and not allowing them to play the game, and basically never letting them in. Next, on to a deck that I actually am very high on. That is the Mega Excadrill deck, new in the Pitch Black format. For me, is an A tier deck. It knows exactly what it's doing. Once it has set up initially with either Precious Trolley or with the Call for Family attack from Drillbell, it is going to play from the board and require pretty much nothing else in order to complete its strategy, which is hitting hard for the active with Excadrill, and then in certain matchups, after the first Excadrill is knocked out, going into either Metagross, maybe even 2 Metagross back to back, and then finally another Excadrill, and making your opponent take more than 6 prize cards if they want to win the game or require a boss's orders at a specific turn in order to boss around a Metagross and take more than 1 prize card. The Metagross hitting for 300 damage. They play Kieran in the Excadrill deck, so it can hit up to 330 with that. Incredibly powerful, and basically it just, yes, you sacrifice some level of agency when playing this deck, but dissimilar to decks that you could say lack agency of other decks, it's almost a good thing or not an issue with Excadrill, because there is so little that it needs to do. There's just no decisions, because as long as you basically don't get donked, if you manage to start a Drillbur, you're going to be playing the game. As long as you can get into Genesect and Drillbur, that's all you need. Hand Disruption, it doesn't really matter. Energy Disruption also doesn't really matter. And it's really going to be on Dragapult, the different Dragapult variants, how they respond. Will they stop running the Crushing Hammer? Will Dragapult players start running Dragapult Blaziken more so in order to counter this deck? I'm really high on this deck, A tier, pushing up. This is, to me, probably the deck that could be considered S tier of any of the non-Dragapult variants. This one is the closest. It's at the top of A tier for me, the Mega Excadrill deck. Going to cover the Dragapult variants now, starting with Dragapult Blaziken. It is an S tier deck for me. I don't think it was in the Chaos Rising format. However, because of this Excadrill deck and Blaziken having the best time into it, it's definitely an S tier right now. Been seeing a lot of play, and it does have a favorable matchup because of the type weakness of Excadrill. However, putting that aside, I still would maintain that Blaziken is the worst partner of the kind of, if you're going to play Dragapult with another support Pokemon, Dusknoir or Blaziken, I would say that of the three, straight Dragapult, Dusknoir, and the regular Dragapult, I would say that Blaziken is the weakest partner. It can be a bit of a liability if it gets trapped in the active without any energy, and in quite many matchups, it's just not required. In other matchups, it is not something that you'd really want to be attacking with, and it can just be kind of awkward. However, with the meta being what it is in this new deck, Excadrill being released, I think it's in a great spot, and it's a perfectly reasonable way to play Dragapult at the moment. Next, straight Dragapult. Still, to me, considerably, it is the best deck in the format. I'm not saying anything groundbreaking there for sure. It's a commonly held sentiment. I do rank it higher than Dragapult Dusknoir, and I have done since the previous formats as well. So since the previous set release, it hasn't changed with Pitch Black coming out in Chaos Rising and the Perfect Order format. I still considered Dragapult to be better played just by itself than with Dusknoir, although I think it's very close. The straight Dragapult is the best deck because it is the most resilient to disruption. It has its own draw engine built into the evolution line of the Pokemon it's going to be attacking with. Basically, it is the deck that is going to execute its strategy the highest percentage of the time of the decks that have a really elite tier strategy, which is attacking with Phantom Dive, putting 200 damage on the active Pokemon and 6 damage counters anywhere you would like on the bench. That's an incredibly powerful attack, and also this deck is, because of that built-in draw engine with Dracloak, is going to get to do that so often. It's a very resilient strategy, and it just is the best deck in format. Dragapult Dusknoir, at the moment, I would actually say is probably slightly below Dragapult Blaziken as the lowest ranking deck of the Tier S Dragapult decks. However, it's very close between Blaziken and Dusknoir, and I haven't been playing with either. I've just been watching people play it, because when I play Dragapult, I play straight Dragapult, enough to kind of know the nuances of it, but I would put it behind Blaziken just, again, because of the Excadrill being in the format. However, it has to be acknowledged the power of the Dragapult Dusknoir deck. Being able to use all of that stuff I just mentioned about how great it is to be playing Dragapult, and then also having the reach of being able to put 13 extra damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon, knocking out Mega Evolution EX Pokemon, knocking out higher HP EX Pokemon in one hit with a Dusknoir 13 damage counters, or popping the Dusclops for an extra 5. Incredibly powerful. When I'm playing Zoroark and I'm playing against Dragapult, of these three, like to see Dusknoir the least. Yes, they do need to give up a prize card in order to be able to take a one-hit KO, but if they combo that with some hand disruption at the right time, or if they are able to item lock their opponent and force them to take the first prize and then stamp them, using the Dusknoir, the extra prize can in many cases not even matter. It's, again, just a fantastic deck in the format, and rightfully still in Tier S, and it's very close. If the Excadrill deck wasn't here, I would definitely be putting it above Blaziken, but as I said, because of that, I would put it as currently the worst positioned of the three variants of Dragapult at the moment. Next up, in Zoroark, as I mentioned, what I've been playing recently. I would be comfortable to put Zoroark in either A or actually B tier at the moment, but I think I'm going to go A tier at the very bottom of A tier. it's still the deck I enjoy playing the most since I picked it up maybe a month or two ago. But the problems with this deck have become, or it's changed. The problems have multiplied with the release of the new Gladion card, making Festival Lead a lot more popular. And Mega Excadrill is also not an easy matchup, I would say, for Zoroark. Even if you use the Darmanitan and you try and win in like 3 attacks by taking out 2 Excadrills, they can heal the Excadrill. It's a difficult matchup for sure. I wouldn't call it a favored matchup unless you specifically tech something for that. It, I would say, definitely suffered from the release of the new set. Still, an incredibly high agency deck that is great fun to play with the transformation tomes or even without. Very enjoyable, and it gets you to think about playing the game. You get to see your whole deck, so I love playing it. But this is not a list based on how much I enjoy playing a given deck. I couldn't, for example, put it in front of Mega Excadrill. I would say for sure that Excadrill, for most players, is a better play for the World Cup. If you are... of the World Cup. The World Cup was a third-party tournament that just passed, for the World Championships, rather. In general, I wouldn't put it above Excadrill for most players. Just as an example, Festival Lead at the very top of B tier has a great time into Zoroark. But still, I just think that this Festival Lead deck bricks a lot. Zoroark, it can brick, but it's, it has that excellent draw engine with the trade ability from Zoroark, and it gets to play the game a lot more, even if you do have a more difficult matchup spread than, say, Festival Lead, for example, at the moment. I think that it's just a really high agency deck, and if you can play Zoroark well, which I'm kind of implying with this list, is that whoever's going to be piloting the deck knows what they're doing, then Zoroark still, to me, is an A tier deck, but it's not any higher than that for sure. Next up, Alakazam the Dunsparce. I also would include the Alakazam Toucannon variant. In this, I actually think they're fairly similar, and I'll explain why. In terms of their kind of position in this tier list, I would put both variants in tier B, behind Festival Lead, however. With Alakazam, the Toucannon allows you to have a secondary attacker, so if you get your hand disrupted and you're then not in a position where Alakazam's attack would be doing that much damage, you can then use Toucannon instead and take KOs that way, because its damage output is affected only by the number of benched Pokemon in play. However, the problem with Toucannon is the same in some ways as the Dunsparce, the draw engine for Alakazam, in that they are normal type Pokemon, very vulnerable to hand disruption plus Watchtower. It's very unlikely that you're going to be able to take a KO next turn, because it also would turn off Toucannon's draw ability. So unless there's a ton of bench Pokemon in play, it's not really leaving you in that much better of a situation. With Alakazam, you really want to be taking one-hit KOs. You don't want to be giving your opponent Monkey Dory damage in matchups where that's relevant. And yeah, it just doesn't really serve you to be two-hitting stuff, from my experience playing as Zoroark and also Dragapult against Alakazam. Its matchup spread, I think, is decent, especially against those multi-prize Pokemon that it can reach high numbers, the uncapped damage potential of Alakazam until the hand is disrupted, of course. However, if I was going to play a single prize deck, I just can't justify that it is better off than playing Festival Lead at the moment. That's just, in reality, Festival Lead, because of typing and because of the Gladion's card, which is obviously not something you could have. It's like completely counter-synergistic with, Alakazam. You couldn't play it. I couldn't say that it's in a better spot than Festival Lead at the moment, so it's comfortably in tier B. Next up, Slowking. I would say slightly above Alakazam. It has that high roll potential. If you get the turn 2 or even turn 3 Trifrost Kyurem attack, you can bench wipe your opponent and basically, except in certain situations against Dragapult, because that deck is so resilient, you generally just do win if you manage to do that and take like multiple KOs and you can cripple your opponent's bench. However, from my experience playing against it, it is actually fairly rare that they're able to do that. And depending on the deck you're playing, you can definitely play around it by not giving them targets to use that turn to attack on. At the moment, Dragapult is not really playing Shaman, so that also bodes well for you. If they start doing that, then this deck becomes just not really playable, not really a viable option. But at the moment, that isn't happening, so I would say comfortably in tier B for Slowking. I also like with the Slowking deck, you have a lot of these kind of unusual and unexpected single prize Pokemon that you can use their attacks as Slowking. The Seek Inspiration kind of gauntlet that you can put your opponent through. Pokemon like the Annihilate, there's two different types. There's one that does 100 plus 5 damage counters to the bench, and then there's a fighting type Annihilate that knocks out both active Pokemon. Can be very powerful against high HP Megas. And then there's like the Zoroark, which does, I'm pretty sure, 210 damage to any one bench Pokemon. And there's just a bunch of weird, there's like, I think it's called Pawmot or something, that like inflicts paralysis, or something like that. There's a bunch of these wacky single prize attackers that you could tech in. I don't know if that's necessarily the best way to play Slowking, but it is the most kind of appealing to me. And even the Mega Slowbro EX is a new tech that people are using for the Festival Lead matchup, because it does 180 damage for free Psychic Energy. And then the next turn, any Pokemon attacking the Mega Slowbro has 12 damage counters placed on it, meaning that a Festival Lead attacker, even if they have a Growing Glass energy or if they try to attack with Seeking or whatever, no matter what, they are going to KO themselves and obviously therefore not get the second attack. So that is one thing that I learned recently that Slowking players can play in order to have a better time in that matchup, which is pretty significant. Yeah, I rate the deck fairly highly. I would say, yeah, that's probably fair in the B tier, in my opinion. This Hide and Seek deck is difficult to me. There was a fair bit of hype for this one. At the moment, it just hasn't shown. Once it hit the kind of Western, once it broke out of Japan and the Pitch Black set was released, it just really hasn't done anything or shown itself, at least the current lists, the way that people are playing it, hasn't shown itself to be that effective. To me, the damage output is just not high enough in a lot of matchups, and the reality of it is that it doesn't just auto-win Dragapult, as, you know, people were saying, oh, this deck is going to have like a really good like 70% plus win rate into Dragapult. And I have the statistics actually up, the Trainer Hill statistics, and into Dragapult it is favored generally, or it's favored into Dragapult Dusknoir like 56%. However, against like straight Dragapult, it is only 36% favored into that matchup, which is not good. It's really not good enough, unfortunately. But nevertheless, it is still not a terrible deck. I would say it's somewhat similar to the other single prize decks that we have in the format that have without really the potential to one-hit KO their opponents, which is what is kind of appealing about these three here. If you see Festival Lead, Slowking, and Alakazam to Dunsparce, they're all taking one-hit KOs, even on, Festival Lead might be technically a two-hit KO, but you get the idea, it's in a single turn. And Delmice doesn't have that, so I can't really put it above C tier. Grimmsnarl and Frostlass has been seeing more play. This, to me, no matter like when I'm playing Dragapult or when I'm playing Zoroark against this deck, it is always a tough matchup if the opponent knows what they're doing. The Frostlass is a deceptively powerful card. The damage counter it places on all Pokemon with abilities in between turns, it adds up a lot quicker than you would anticipate. And I think that card, kind of a theory I have, is it like exploits a thing in people where we kind of don't immediately calculate just how bad or just how quickly numbers can add up over a period of time. Because if you actually think about it, once they have like two of these Frostlass in play, 4 damage counters, you know, either side of a turn on all Pokemon with abilities, that's going to add up really quickly. Grimmsnarl's attack is fairly underpowered in and of itself, and so my strategy against it is always to try and, you know, boss around the Grimmsnarl and take out its supporters, take out its Munkidori and its Frostlass. However, if you're unable to do that, if it manages to get set up, then this deck, to me, is closer to B tier than C tier. I would put it probably at the very bottom of B tier at the moment. That's kind of my opinion. I can see why people would say C tier as well, because I haven't seen really like how bad this could get. I would say probably against like Excadrill, for example, the damage is just not getting high enough, and Excadrill doesn't have an ability. So it's just a problem, you know, like once they have that set up, they can go Excadrill, and then even if you start getting damage on their Matangs, they can just evolve one before it gets knocked out and make it very difficult, and also have a single prize attacker. It's probably a very ugly matchup, which is not good because I'm so high on this Excadrill deck. But still, I would put it at the very bottom of B tier at the moment, the Mighty Grimmsnarl deck. Mega Absol box. So Mega Absol as a card is my personal favorite card in the current format. I think it's the most powerful in and of itself, meaning removed from any deck or archetype, which is kind of a weird way to look at a card. Obviously still considering the format it's in, but to me, Mega Absol having 2 attacks, the first one for 2 energies is literally just a one-hit KO on any Pokemon if you can get 6 damage counters on it. And the second one is 200 damage for 3 energies, plus removing a card, like getting full knowledge of your opponent's hand and removing what you deem to be their best card. That, on paper, is just such an insane attack. The problem with Mega Absol is trying to fit it into a deck can be quite awkward. The typing at the moment with high-powered grass decks, at the moment it's Festival Lead, but previously it was like Hydrapple and, you know, big basics decks. With those decks running around, it just is kind of a liability, giving up free prize cards. I really enjoy playing with Mega Absol. I would put it in C tier, unfortunately, but I believe that it is a deck that definitely there is a build out there. People can kind of crack the code and find a way to play Mega Absol much better. I think that those attacks are so powerful that there just kind of has to be a way for it to reach up into the B or even the A tier in specific decks, if people can figure it out. Mega Greninja, well, it's a very unfortunate deck, I would say, because it just hasn't done anything in terms of results. Top players don't really choose to play it, and it just didn't really do anything at the major tournaments when it was in the format, and even online now it doesn't really do anything. Again, on paper though, 200 damage through the active, which with returning an energy to your hand, and then also putting 6 anywhere you want, not even just on the bench, like Dragapult is limited to just putting damage on the bench, but Mega Greninja could put it on the active and take one-hit KOs that way on, you know, higher HP EX Pokemon. It just seems like a somewhat inconsistent deck in terms of actually doing what it needs to do. You want to ideally get out multiple Mega Greninjas, which is really easier said than done. If you do manage to do that, then you should really win. With the Surfing Beach, you can kind of parry between them and use multiple of the, I think it's called Mortal Shuriken, or that might be the attack, but the ability that puts 6 damage counters in exchange for discarding an energy. I can't put it above C tier. Probably it is D tier, to be honest. I'll put it at the top of D tier. I would rather have like a contrarian opinion on it, but truly it just hasn't done anything, so I can't justify it. It's unfortunate for Mega Greninja. Ogerpon, Meganium, Hydrapple, or basically the Hydrapple deck, has kind of fallen off in terms of play, and I think a lot of the meta share, the people who were playing Hydrapple, this kind of, you know, gets called a beat stick, 2-prizer deck like that, I think a lot of them have probably migrated to playing either Lucario or maybe playing Raging Bolt, or a lot of them probably are playing Mega Excadrill, because I just have not seen this deck very much on the ladder since the new set came out. I don't think that there's anything that wrong with it. It does take one-hit KOs. Grass typing is pretty good because other than Blaziken, there's not really that many, you know, fire types in top meta decks. So I don't really see that much of a problem with Hydrapple, but it just seems to have been usurped by Mega Excadrill mainly with the new set coming out. That's all I can really assume. I still would put it in C tier, probably at the top of C tier, even ahead of Mega Absol, because as I said, there's really nothing wrong with Hydrapple. I don't see anything that's changed that much. Maybe some more of the single prize decks running around that can one-hit KO Meganium with, Festival Lead getting a buff that can one-hit KO Ogopons and trade favorably rather, then that might have affected it, but still I don't think it's a bad deck at all. Beedrill, I would say probably similar. The thing with Beedrill is that it is not as consistent as, for example, Hydrapple, in my opinion. It runs into issues with pricing. If, a lot of your Beedrill pieces are prized, yes, you can play, I think it is called Lucky Ticket or something ticket, in order to exchange your prize cards, but you actually need to find that, and then if you get put under item lock, you can just be in a really bad situation with Beedrill. It's another kind of beat stick 2-prizer deck, and it has a really high damage output when it does get going, but it's just not consistent enough. It runs into consistency issues, is what I found playing against Beedrill. Rocket's Honchkrow definitely got worse with the release of the new set, mainly because of that increase in Festival Lead play. Unfortunately, to me, it is probably a C-tier deck as well. I would say it is probably slightly better than Hide and Sneak. No, I would say because Hide and Sneak still is pretty solid into some variants of Dragapult. So Rocket's Honchkrow has to be a C-tier deck, in my opinion. It's just a lot of the appeal of playing that deck that was there before the release of Pitch Black is no longer there, unfortunately. And it is something that when I was playing Dragapult, if you play against someone who knows how to pilot this deck, it can actually be quite difficult. And still, when I'm playing Zoroark against it, it is, it's not something that I really want to see them flip over a Honchkrow or a Murkrow. But its general matchup spread in the meta is just not as good as it was, so I think it has fallen with the release of the new set. Lucario, I have to be honest, I have just never really believed in this deck. I don't really understand why it has seen more of an influx of play recently, and even top players do choose to pick up Lucario. I've just never really believed in it. I think that Excadrill is way better if you want to play this kind of deck. That being said, it still kind of has to be like a B-tier deck, maybe C-tier. From my experience playing against it, because it does win games, I just don't think it wins enough. Like, if you are going for that strategy, high HP Mega Evolution Pokemon that hits really hard and kind of just wins in a somewhat conventional way, I would think that there were better options. I think that Mega Excadrill is a better option, and I would even possibly say that Ogopon Meganium Hydrapple is a better option than Lucario. The thing that kind of pushes it over the line for me is the Hariyama can be very handy in allowing you to kind of boss and play another supporter on the same turn. And also the early game pressure that Lucario can put on the opponent isn't really present in a deck like Hydrapple with the Zoroark Lunatone combo. That is pretty nice to have there as a draw engine, and also being able to do 70 damage for the active with Zoroark. It can, you can really suppress your opponent like that. So I guess as I talk about it, I understand more why people choose to play this deck, but I'm still just not that high on it, and it's really in between B and C tier for me, but I'm kind of erring on the side of putting it into B tier. Basic box, so like Terra box, not specifically the deck that won NAIC, I have that there as well, Lily's Clefairy specifically. Just kind of big basic box, relying on Kangaskhan and Latias and Ogopon and all of that. Kind of just has to be, for me at the moment, if you're just playing it as is, I would probably say B tier at the very end. Could also go into C tier. I don't really see the appeal of playing just this at the moment. I would probably try and partner it with something else. I think some of these Terra Pokemon are good in other decks, but at the moment, I just don't see it as the most appealing option. With the Ogopons, I think that Dragapult has a pretty solid time into these variants of the deck, which is kind of why the Lily's Clefairy deck did better, because it focused on just the parts of the deck that do well against Dragapult. And I guess since I'm talking about it so much, I'll rank this deck now at the moment, specifically the Lily's Clefairy focus build, and I actually think that this is probably worse than Basic Box, even though I talk positively about its match into Dragapult. It's definitely not an auto win, it's just something that Dragapult players have to figure out, specifically how to deal with this deck. And also, it has a much worse general kind of matchup spread into the meta with the single prize decks. Yeah, I don't think that Lily's Clefairy in the Pitch Black format is really the play. Cynthia's Garchomp is interesting. When I play against it, it bricks a lot. It's vulnerable, in my opinion, to energy disruption because they don't play that many energies, and it's also they don't play like energy acceleration. And so hand disrupt plus energy disruption can be a problem. Also, you can like retreat lock them, and you can try and wipe their Roserades or whatever. Cynthia's Garchomp, for me, is a deck in C tier, comfortably in C tier, probably slightly above Beedrill. Yeah, that kind of makes sense to me. Yeah, it's a kind of linear strategy, and there's a lot of things on paper that are appealing, like the free retreat of Cynthia's Garchomp, and the fact that it's kind of its own self-contained like engine, like it has the Roserades to increase the damage output, it has its own Pokemon tool, the Cynthia's Power Weight, to get Garchomp up to 400 effective HP. But I just don't really think that it's consistent enough. It doesn't have the inbuilt draw engine like Dragapult, for example, to guarantee that you actually get to set up and play the game and get multiple Garchomps out and get the energies required on them. And as I said, it's vulnerable to energy disruption. You know, I'm just thinking of Unfair Stamp, Hammerheads, making it so that you can't one-shot a Dragapult next turn, and that can just put you in a really problematic situation where Dragapult can be then setting up to not even take a KO that turn, and then the next turn take like 4 prizes and really kind of ruin what you have set up there with Cynthia's Garchomp. But overall, a solid power level for that deck. Playing Basic Box with Raging Bolt, I actually think is probably slightly better than playing it without Raging Bolt at the moment. I would say that if you were to play it with Raging Bolt, though, I wouldn't look at it as like a Raging Bolt focused deck. I would probably just include the one copy and kind of have it as, or one or maybe two, and kind of have it as just one of the different attackers in the deck. Yeah, I don't like Raging Bolt. It gets kind of slandered, in my opinion. It gets talked about quite negatively, but I actually think that it is handy, especially with the, you know, the higher HP Mega Pokemon, to have something that for sure has that uncapped damage output and, you know, can for sure one-hit KO like anything that you might come up against. So yeah, it's maybe slightly less consistent than some builds of Basic Box, but I actually rate Raging Bolt comfortably in B tier. I would say a bit higher than what I've seen other people rate it. Ceruledge, to me, this is a D tier deck. Sorry if you play Ceruledge, I mean no offense by it, but I think that it bricks a lot. I think it just sometimes doesn't even get the numbers that it needs to, and even if it does, if you come up against a single prize deck, they can trade favorably into you. Really just not a fan of Ceruledge, unfortunately. The Manectric Electric deck, I almost even want to put in C tier, but I will still probably put it in D just because it's unproven, and I'll also say that I just don't really have enough experience to speak that authoritatively on it. However, I think that there is some very positive things going for it. The Dynamotor ability on E-Electric, I think is very powerful. I think that that's really solid to have the energy acceleration that way. The new Voltaic energy, increasing the damage output, making it so that Manectric can for sure take one-hit KOs on pretty much anything it comes up against. Its typing as well is a positive thing for Manectric. Electric type or lightning type is just a very irrelevant typing, and not a lot of stuff is going to be hitting you for weakness, not a lot of relevant Pokemon. It's just fairly appealing overall in that regard. However, I think probably what kills this deck, and I think Manectric has like free retreat as well, which is positive. I think what maybe kills this deck is the fact that Manectric is a mega Pokemon, and taking free prizes by knocking one out means that you just trade so unfavorably into a lot of the single prize decks, and a lot of them have recently got a buff, and there's significant play of those. And then when you say, okay, maybe the single prize decks, some of them like Festival Lead, that's just not really, or even Alakazam, it's not really something we can win. How does it do against Dragapult? And yes, it could one-hit KO Dragapult, and and Dragapult can't return KO in that regard. But I think again that it is probably pretty vulnerable to certain plays, such as like, yeah, the hand disruption, and then if they can then boss KO, I don't know, your only electric or something like that, it could basically make it so you have to skip a turn, and then they can get in a position where, as Dragapult likes to do, they delay taking prizes and then take them all on the same turn. But I will be completely honest, I haven't really played that much up, so I'm not exactly sure how it plays out, but overall, until proven otherwise, I'm going to leave it in D tier. Crustle has a big problem in the meta at the moment because of Mega Excadrill being able to play, use Metagross as an attacker. Means that Crustle is just not the play at the moment. I would put it at the very bottom of C tier because it's just like, I don't think that you can take an auto loss into, like a proper true auto loss into Mega Excadrill at the moment. And I don't think that it for sure beats all of the other decks in such a way. It obviously doesn't. All of the single prize decks have really no problem with it for the most part. Well, maybe Alakazam could have a problem because of missed energies if they're not able to remove it, but a lot of the single prize decks just really have no issue with Crustle, and they have seen, yeah, an increase in the meta share, so I just would not be playing Crustle. Ethan's Typhlosion we'll put in D tier. I don't think it is in that good a spot, and also it is just not a deck that is considered that highly, even previous to the new set coming out. Yeah, I think that it's a fine deck, but I would put it on the very edge of what is considered kind of meta relevant, and I think that it's, you know, not a deck that like for sure beats Dragapult, and I really don't have that much experience with it, but Ethan's Typhlosion I would put in D tier. Tank Kangaskhan Bouffalant. This deck seems to me like one that would have solid matchup into maybe like hide and seek, and I was going to say Rockets, yeah, like not Rockets Honchkrow, but Rockets Mewtwo, for example. Single prize mainly focused decks that can't one-hit KO over Kangaskhan. It's probably got a very good time into it, or they can't, you know, inflict serious damage. But a deck like, if it comes up against like Slowking, if they play Annihilate, it for sure loses. Even if they just play the Metagross, they probably lose. If they play, you know, like if they play Kyurem and they can wipe, I'm not sure how much HP the Kangaskhan's have, that probably isn't relevant, but if they can wipe your Dunsparces, if that's a draw engine, I think that, again, a lot of the single prize decks can be a big problem for this. I would put it at maybe at the bottom of C tier. Whoa, so can I let me move it? Yeah, thank you. But it probably could go into D tier, and again, I don't have that much experience with it. Rockets Mewtwo, I think, is not in a great spot at the moment. I'd probably put it at the top of C tier. It did unexpectedly well in NAIC, but I think it's kind of like I've said with a lot, with like Festival Lead is just kind of the supreme single prize deck to play at the moment, and I still don't rate Festival Lead that highly, but I think it is just better than playing Rockets Mewtwo at the moment. The damage output is just way higher, and this deck, even though I would say it has improved using the Prism Tower to discard unneeded cards from your hand, and being able to cycle through its deck a bit better before, because that was its issue, was consistency, I still just don't rate it that highly. Toxtricity Box, another deck that probably suffers a lot from consistency issues. I want to put it in either D tier or C tier. I really love Absol, so I am tempted to put it maybe at the very bottom of C tier. Realistically, it probably should be D tier, but this deck with the Brute Bonnet has a really high damage output potential. I think it can like one-shot pretty much everything because it relies on just having damage on either the active Pokemon or the Brute Bonnet itself. I'd have to confirm that, but either way, it uses Monkey Dory to manipulate that, and it can generate its own damage by attaching energy with Toxtricity's ability. So yeah, I'm a fan of it. The few games that I did play with it a while back, it just does suffer from some consistency issues as well. Metagross without Mega Excadrill, so just the Metagross and the Heatran strategy, I would put this somewhere probably like here in C tier as well. I think that that's an interesting way to play it. I think that overall it's a way better choice to play Mega Excadrill with your Metagross, but if you just wanted to play it as a single prize deck, I actually think that it's not that bad and can do really well trading into higher HP Mega decks using just Metagross's attack, and you can use damage modifiers. You can use Kieran, Brave Bangle to hit really hard, up to like 330, 360 damage and one-shot everything with just the Metagross. Mega Venusaur, I would probably put it in D tier. I think it's probably just too slow, and it's not the best way to use that Meganium engine. Once you have the Venusaur set up, that's great, but you actually have to get it set up, and I don't really see a good reason to play it over, for example, Hydrapple if you wanted to play that kind of deck. Starmie Frostlass, I really don't think this deck is a good idea. Whenever I play against it, it's like, unless they really high roll and they run me over with Starmie, which, you know, that can happen against any deck, you can just brick and lose. If they play a proper game, it seems like when you're playing against Starmie Frostlass, as the game goes on, their chance of winning just goes down, down, down. Like, it would, to me, really suck to play this kind. It would feel bad to play this kind of deck, because you might be very hopeful at the start that you're just going to run your opponent over. But if they can eke out even half a setup, if you're playing as Dragapult, for example, and you can weather the storm at first, then you, as the game progresses, your chance of winning is just, it gets higher and higher and higher, because it's a very front-loaded strategy. And as long as your opponent, as I said, can weather the storm from the Starmie at the start, and then with the Frostlass, if you have your own Monkey Dory, if they're playing the baby Frostlass as well, which most of them are, you can, kind of return fire in that way. But if they're not, or even still with the Mega Frostlass, the only thing you need to be concerned about is the amount of cards in your hand, and that to me is a really easy thing to be aware of once you know what your opponent is playing. Yes, there are situations where it's kind of tough to deal with, but I would put it at the bottom of C tier. I could even see myself putting it into D tier, because I just think that it's a quite linear strategy that, once you're aware that your opponent's playing it, any decent player, as I said, if they don't really high roll and they get the turn 1 Salvatore or whatever, and they just donk you, it's like, well, if that doesn't happen, then in a long full game, then I don't think they're that favored. Lopunny to Dunsparce, to me, is not as bad as people make it out to be. It did win a tournament only, a few months ago. Major, won a regional. However, I think what really happened is Dragapult figured out how to play against it. Dragapult players figured out that if you just turn off their draw engine, and if you spread damage in such a way that it gives them a really awkward decision, or if you put damage on multiple Lopunny, in so that they cannot use Wallies, obviously, on multiple in the same turn, and they also cannot use Wallies plus another supporter in the same turn. If you really limit their draw support, they might not even have access to the Wallies. I would put it probably somewhere around here in C tier. Not a bad deck at all, but it is, again, a somewhat linear strategy. You know what they're going to do. They're going to just pivot between a couple of Lopunnies so they can turn on its ability to do more damage with its first attack, and they are going to try and use Wallies every turn. But if they can't do that, then they're not really going to be trading very favorably at all. So since Dragapult kind of figured it out, how to play against it, it has not seen much success. But still, I wouldn't say it's a bad deck or anything. I would actually probably say that Hops Trevenant is a bad deck, unfortunately. I know it won an event. I would put it in, I feel like it's similar to Ethan's Typhlosion. I understand that it won an event. That to me was not to discredit the player's achievement. It's great that he was winning to managed to win it, but I really don't understand how that happened. It's kind of strange to me, but I guess because you can play Lily's Clefairy in it, and you can one-shot Dragapult. If Dragapult, and then also he played Shaman in it in the finals. He came up against a Slowking, and so he just used Shaman and auto-won that, basically. But in terms of the actual run, I guess he just ran into a lot of Dragapult players, and he managed to win with Lily's Clefairy, I assume. Even with that, I don't think that you are favored. The fact that in order to even do meaningful damage with a Trevenant, you need to have specifically one of your Hops Pokemon being knocked out in the previous turn. It's just not a way that I would want to run a single prize deck. There's such powerful single prize decks in the format at the moment, and Hops Trevenant to me is not one of them. It's almost like a worse version of the Hide and Sneak deck. Wailord, I would put in D tier as well, just kind of unproven. The kind of tank Wailord. I think that it probably struggles from consistency issues because it doesn't have a kind of natural synergy. Like if you look at Tank Kangaskhan, it's like, okay, all normal type Pokemon. You could for sure use like the Dunsparce, or you could use some other consistency engine, some kind of draw engine with Wailord in order to get the energies on it, but it is such a linear strategy, and the actual damage output from the Wailord isn't that great. And also Kangaskhan in of himself is a draw engine, with his ability allowing you to draw 2 cards every turn if he's in the active, whereas Wailord doesn't have that. I think that it's kind of a meme deck, but maybe there could very well, especially with the release of newer sets, be like a kind of cracked, broken way to play Wailord where it becomes a serious meta contender, but at the moment I haven't seen any evidence of that. Steven's Metagross, I just don't think, for a 2-price deck, I don't think the damage output is really high enough for Steven's Metagross for it to be something that I would consider playing. If I was going to rank these, I would probably put it at the very end. I mean, Mega Greninja isn't that bad. I would put Mega Greninja at the top of the list, so I was going to rearrange those. I don't think that Steven's Metagross is really a meta deck. Getting towards the end of it here, Starmie Dusknoir. I think that this deck suffers from a lot of consistency issues. It's kind of similar to the Starmie Frostlass deck, probably slightly worse, because it has only really one way of attacking with the Starmie and then reaching higher with Dusknoir. If it runs you over, again, of course, like the other Starmie deck, that's great, but I don't think it usually does that. Okidogi, its problem is that if Dragapult decides to just not bench any 2-prize liabilities, then Okidogi will never really be taking 2 prizes in a single turn, which you kind of need to be doing as one of these single prize decks. Probably has a decent matchup spread against some of the other single prize decks. It's not a terrible typing, they're fighting type, and some of the multi-prize decks it can hit and trade favorably, but Okidogi overall hasn't really done that much recently, and it's just the damage output thing, only being able to hit for like, I think it's like 210 if it has a Dark Energy or something like that, or it might even be a bit less. It's not enough, it's not really doing enough unless your opponent benches Fezandipity or Meowth, but if they're smart, they will not do that unless they absolutely have to, and they can play quite conservatively. If they utilize Monkey Dory against you, it could be a big problem. They could be taking multiple KOs in a single turn. So yeah, not really a fan of where Okidogi sits currently. Finally, Toucannon, and I'm going to take this as being like Toucannon with the Terra Pokemon in order to use Area Zero. And I actually think that this is a decent deck, probably still some consistency issues. I would put this in C tier. I think that the draw engine component of Toucannon is not actually that good. A single card per turn, when you compare it to, for example, Zoroark, it's letting you thin 1 card and go +2. Dracloak is look at the top 2 and pick 1. Just a single card per turn, and it being a stage 2, I'm not overly impressed by that. I think it is probably vulnerable to item lock, certainly vulnerable to Watchtower. And you have to have a Terra Pokemon in play in order to use Area Zero. That becomes potentially a liability that your opponent can take advantage of, depending on the Terra Pokemon that you choose to play. So I think so far I couldn't put it above C, but I would comfortably put it there because I do see the vision. It's a single prize attacker that can hit really hard if you can fill your bench. And it does have an inbuilt draw engine, even if it is not the greatest draw engine when compared to Dracloak, Zoroark, etc. So that's where I would put all of these decks at the moment. In S tier, Dragapult variants, and in A tier, Mega Excadrill and Zoroark. In B tier, at the top, Festival Lead, then Slowking, Alakazam, Grimmsnarl, Frostlass, Lucario, Raging Bolt, and Basic Box together there. And then the C tier and the D tier, you can also see. As I get to C tier and below, the exact position is not that relevant, but I would just say it's more general. Like I do think Rocket's Mewtwo is better than Starmie Frostlass, for example. But for S, A, and B tier, it is ordered for sure in terms of where I see all of these decks. I just wanted to put this out to give my opinion on this. So thank you very much for watching.